All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's tournament strategy show where we'll look at last night's slate, then we'll look at today's slate, and really just make sure we're all on the same page with it. Phil, good to see you, man. Hope life is treating you well. Let's look at last night's slate, see what went right, see what went wrong. For me, last night was not a great night. But that's really just more so because of the way I construct lineups. It's last night was the true definition of studs, scrubs and studs and duds. I don't remember, but literally, we see a crap ton of studs fit in with a ton of scrubs. So first off, we have Luka Doncic. I was not on Luka last night. I had exposure to pretty much all the other studs, but I did not have exposure to him. This was the $100,000 winning lineup from last night. Somehow became a 5-way tie. Wild that happened, but it does happen sometimes. John Concher, we were over the field on him. He made this line. Kyle Anderson, I think we were exactly at field weight on him. He wasn't anything special. He just made lines work. Aldama, similar story. We ended up being over the field on him. He just made lines work. Joel Embiid, I forced exposure to last night. Did not force enough, unfortunately. I think I had like 20-25% exposure to Joel Embiid. You needed really at least 30. Ideally, you were probably over the field around 40%. So he crushed. Everyone knows that. Nikhil Walker-Alexander was a lock for me. He was in every single one of my lineups. Didn't care. That went well. Karl-Anthony Towns is painful. We had a 15% min on him at the end of the day. Originally, we had a 30% min, but once we got the Edwards news, I lowered my exposure to 15, which was around field weight. Was fine. Kept most of my lines competitive, but just not having as much was a painful thought. And then I wasn't on Thad Young at all. So yeah, last night was an interesting night. Wasn't my best, but lived to see another day. Zolo, what's up, man? Yeah, I agree. I like a few interesting spots on this slate. Not as much low ownership, but I'm interested in seeing who you like. Thomas Dye, good to see you, man. Let's jump into the slate. First off, we have the Nuggets going up against the Pacers. For the Nuggets, they're pretty healthy here. Aaron Gordon's probable. Michael Porter Jr. is probable. Strother has been out for a while, so nothing worth talking about too much. Per usual, Nikola Jokic is the best play on this team. His ownership at 15% makes me happy to play him, but not someone I'm going to try and force too much exposure to. Jamal Murray, I like a little bit more at a lower price tag. Good spot, good matchup, good game environment. He's someone I want to make sure I have exposure to tonight. And then when it comes to Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon, these are two guys priced extremely appropriately, in my opinion. Again, they're in a good game environment. If they show up, I'm totally fine with that. But again, I don't feel strongly enough about them where I want to force exposure to it. And it's mostly just because of the ownership. I think Gordon in particular is a solid play. It's just he's not standing out for me too much where I feel like I need to force it. Ideally, he'll show up a good bit for us naturally on the pre-lock show. Speaking of, if you all are curious, at 5:30 p.m. today, myself and B-Dubs will be on the pre-lock show where we will talk through leverage plays, core plays, and really focus more on the execution of making sure our lines are looking the way we want them to be. So that will happen later. If you're interested in that, link is in the description. Feel free to use the promo code BOB for a 10% discount. If not, that's fine too. Next up, I think there's some fine value plays here. KCP, Reggie Jackson, Watson, Brown. Not guys I'm excited about forcing exposure to, but these are the value options where if we don't get more value on this slate, I'm okay with them slotting into a few lines. None of those guys will be core plays for me, but I'm okay if they're showing up a little bit. Gordon, you like Gordon? Yeah, I mean, I think Gordon's fine. I'm interested in seeing if I end up forcing more exposure to him, but for now, he's not popping for me too much. Appreciate that, Zolo. All right, let's look. Next up, we have the Pacers going up against the Nuggets. For the Pacers, this team has been wild lately, especially what they pulled on Sunday. I don't play NBA DFS, but I still pay attention to what's going on. We saw TJ McConnell actually start for Halliburton, who is out once again tonight, but he only played 12 minutes and he really just fell out of the rotation. He didn't even end the game, which is disappointing to see. And on top of that, they extended the rotation to include even more players, 11 players, which is not an ideal situation for us DFS players. So this is a team that's a little bit tough to talk about. Looks like Miles Turner is going to be relatively chalky on this slate, seeing around 11% ownership. Once again, Miles Turner is a guy I'm fine getting exposure to. I don't like to make a habit out of picking on Nikola Jokic. Guys typically get into foul trouble, and this matchup is just not ideal. Pascal Siakam is the guy who has actually been doing more for this team, which isn't a surprise with Halliburton out, but he's still been lacking that upside that I would like to see from him, even in ideal matchups. So Siakam is one of those players where he makes sense in my head at 7,800, but he just hasn't been showing that upside. So I think if you want to take a shot on him, he makes sense to me logically, but none of the data I look at that helps me make decisions, like the sim model, matchups, things of that sort, is pointing me towards Siakam. So ultimately, I'm just not going to take the shot there. We do have injury news. We have Nimbard and Isaiah Jackson listed as questionable. Of course, if Jackson gets ruled out, that does solidify the minutes for Turner a little bit, so that should make things a little bit more clear. But they still have guys like Jalen Smith here who can possibly see a little bit more run, but I'm still not trying to force exposure to him no matter what, really. And then Nimbard is questionable as well. If he's out, that would solidify TJ McConnell as a viable play for me. Nimbard's really the guy who saw additional run, not really additional run, but saw some decent run in that last game. He closed the game out as well. So it's one of those spots where you can't really trust anyone on the Pacers. But if injury news breaks the right way, I would be more open to taking shots on McConnell and Turner. Siakam is still hard for me to pull the trigger on. Exactly. Just really hard to trust these guys. Dave, appreciate you, man. If you all could hit the like, share, and subscribe button, it really does help the channel grow a lot. And, just helps the people up top realize that people are tuning in and paying attention, all that good stuff. So next up, we have the Knicks going up against the Nets. This Knicks team is good. They're a good team. They're going up against a Nets team that's not great. The unfortunate part for me with the Knicks is that they're relatively healthy. Isaiah Hartenstein is unlikely to play, so that opens up things a little bit, but Isaiah isn't too involved from a usage rate standpoint. Does allow for a few more rebounds and things of that sort, but hard for me to get too excited here. When I think about viable options, I do like the matchup for Jalen Brunson. This game does have the lowest game total on the slate, so this is not a spot I'm looking to force too much exposure to, but I want to take my shots when they make sense. And Jalen Brunson has a great matchup tonight. So let me double check the sim model. Yeah, it doesn't really love any of these guys, but up top at least, like Brunson and Randall. If I had to guess, let me look a little bit closer at Hart, 4,500. Yeah, I had a feeling it would like him. But I want to make sure I'm at least around field weight on Brunson. I think he's worth mentioning. This team has been in good form. It's hard to get too excited about anyone here when they are basically healthy, but I think he makes sense. Julius Randle, you could really go either way between Brunson and Randle. I like the matchup slightly more for Brunson, so I'm going to prioritize him. OG has been playing all the minutes he can handle as of late. Still not popping for me too much from a usage rate standpoint. He's more of just a really good basketball player, less good on the fantasy side. But if you want to take a shot on him, I don't think that's crazy because of just how much he plays. And then last up, Josh Hart is a guy I envision getting some exposure to, but again, not really trying to force exposure to him. If he just shows up naturally, he does, and I expect him to. He has been so far in my early runs. Quick answer for the Nets is I'm not playing them. I'm just not. They're not very great, but also the Knicks are basically, they are the best defense in the NBA right now. So not trying to force exposure against this team. You can take your shots on Bridges or Dinwiddie if you really want to. We finally saw a ceiling performance from Cam Thomas, but I don't think this team's going to be necessary today. All right, now games start to get a little bit more interesting. Next up, we have the Portland Trailblazers against the Thunder. Really solid game total at 233. The concern here is the spread. We always have this spread concern, but I always say it. We saw it last night. I don't play for blowouts, so I'm not going to really change what my overall approach is here. For the Trailblazers, Shaedon Sharpe is out, and he's been out for a little bit now, so it's good that we have that confirmation. That opens things up for the guards on this team. When one or two of them are out, it just makes them more viable plays. Again, with this nice game total and decent, let me look a little bit closer at it. Portland. Yeah, decent matchup against the Thunder. They're not a team that is fantastic from a defensive standpoint, really, outside of Lou Dort. They're just a very average team defensively. So Simons, I like him today. He's looking like a potential leverage play for me on this slate. My only concern is that with him is just that spread, but I really like Simons in this spot. So I can almost guarantee will be a leverage play for me on this slate. Jeremy Grant, 7,100. I already see people talking about it. This is a revenge game for him going up against the Thunder. And he's low owned in a good game environment. We do know Grant has been struggling a little bit here and there. He's not the most consistent player. But at low ownership on a 5-game slate, these are the type of plays I just like being over on. And then Brogdon should show up a little bit naturally. I'm always a little bit less excited about him, but I get the play. DeAndre Ayton is fine. Great matchup going up against Chet. He has not been great defensively. Let me see if the sim likes him at all. Yeah, sim doesn't love him. But I understand the Ayton play. I'm just not planning on forcing it. And then outside of that, I also could be talked into Scoot a little bit, but I don't think this is the right spot for him or Walker. So my main priorities here are Simons and Grant. Love the low ownership. What's up, man? Good to see you. I'm doing all right, taking it day by day. Mr. 5, what's up? I'm glad you were able to catch it live. That's awesome. Glad to have you here. Dixon, what's up, man? Do I want the title of Blowout Whisperer? Not really, to be honest with you. No, that sounds like an awful title. That's a stressful title, too. For me, I've always just stayed tunnel focused. I don't try to predict the blowouts, but there definitely could be a solid strat there. Zolo said Jalen Williams is in great form right now. You are not wrong about that. Martin, good to see you, man. Let's see. Next up, we have the Thunder going up against the Timberwolves. This team is seeing a lot of ownership, but it's completely logical. It's hard for me to even get mad at the ownership because it makes freaking sense. Again, we talked about a good team total, widespread. Most people realize at this point that it's usually a losing strategy trying to predict blowouts. Much easier just to play guys who are in good spots. So SGA is looking like one of the chalkiest pay-up options on this entire slate. I haven't decided if I'm going to force exposure to him, but ideally I'll just be right around field weight exposure. He's too good to completely fade, in my opinion, at only 10K on a 5-game slate. Chet has been a leverage play for me for a good chunk of time. He sees a fantastic matchup against DeAndre Ayton. Their front court is horrid. But he's also seeing ownership, so he's not a sneaky play by any means. He's just a play that makes sense. And then we also have Jalen Williams, who's 6,700, who has been in fantastic form. He is the Thunder that I am going to prioritize, and I will make sure he's in my lines no matter what, just because I like the upside and I like his price tag. That balancing act right there just makes him a priority for me and in a strong matchup. So that factors in a lot for me. Josh Giddey, dart throw. The epitome of a dart throw. His minutes are everywhere. His production is everywhere. He's a viable play, but not someone you want as a core play. He's not someone you want to have in all of your lines. He makes sense if he shows up in a few. If you're playing single entry, probably wouldn't play Josh Giddey in those lines unless you're okay with just a dart throw. Even though usually I would like a lower owned dart throw. I don't love guys like Giddey who are seeing decent ownership. But if you land on him, last spot 5,800, you could do way worse. So that's okay. Lou Dort is not a priority for me. Neither is Isaiah Joe. you can consider some of these plays if a blowout does happen, but you guys know I don't usually play that way. But that being said, in the domination station, if I get a little bit more exposure to some of those players, I'm a lot less likely to X them out than I typically would be. Coach Chris, what's up, man? I'm fading the Pacers, man. I can't do it. I know. I am probably right there with you, to be honest with you. Zolo said Josh Giddey had a 50 DK burger last time they played. Oh, okay. He came off the bench in that game. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. But again, he's viable. Like, if he shows up, I'm fine with it. I'm just not forcing exposure to it. Anthony said Embiid is a tournament lock going forward. I mean, I don't know if a tournament lock is the right word for it. Like, for me, tournament locks are usually lower owned players, but he makes sense. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to talk you off of Embiid for a while. Maybe I will, but I liked him yesterday. I think he'll be fine moving forward too. Definitely the MVP as long as he doesn't miss more games. Anthony Hunt said Randall or Jokic. For me, it's Jokic. But there's a bit of a price difference there. For the Jazz going up against the Pelicans, Jazz have been good here lately. We've seen some ceiling performances, and they're also healthy, which does complicate things a little bit, but we've seen the upside from guys like Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson here recently. We got the Lauri Markkanen leverage play right last week. These are guys who are in a fantastic spot. This is also the highest game total on the slate, so I'm going to make sure I get exposure to these guys. As of right now, Lauri Markkanen, Jordan Clarkson, and Colin Sexton are all guys who are showing up for me naturally, so I don't need to force exposure to them. But if by the time I get to the pre-lock, I'm not seeing Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, or Lauri Markkanen, I'm going to force exposure to them. I am going back and forth on leverage plays here, though. The only reason why I'm debating it is just because of the ownership. Pelicans have been a pretty solid defense this season. Typically not a team I like to pick on too much, but everyone's priced pretty appropriately, pretty nice here, where there's a little bit of meat on the bones for some decent upside. Colin Sexton at 6,200 with 30-40 point upside is nice. I'm looking at Clarkson as a potential pivot off of Sexton, just because Clarkson has that true 50 point upside, which is what I'm always targeting. But again, given the matchup, I am probably just going to end up being around field weight on both of these guys, and then Lauri Markkanen will probably end up being the leverage play. Going up against Zion is one of the weaker points on this defensive team for the Pelicans when it comes to defense. So Lauri Markkanen will probably end up being like a pre-lock show leverage player or something like that. Next up, we have the Pelicans, who are always a pain in the ass when they're healthy. But today it's looking a little bit more clear just because the Jazz are pretty bad at a few positions. The Pelicans are healthy, like I said. Let me pull up the Pelicans right quick. All right. So Utah is not a good team, as most of us know. In particular, their front court is not great. Zion is the priority. He's also extremely chalky on this slate. Kind of like the Jazz, highest game total on the slate. I don't really question ownership as much. I really plan on at least being around field weight on both Zion and CJ McCollum. CJ McCollum going up against Chris Dunn. Again, Jazz are not a great team, so the upside is definitely there. But the selling point for me was really just that the sim model loved CJ McCollum today. And so I usually listen to the sim model. It's not right all the time, but it's helped me more often than it's hurt me. Zion is averaging around 40 DK points against the Jazz the last 2 seasons. That helps too. Yeah. Dunn is questionable. Is that new? Let's see. Let me refresh and see if he shows up. Yeah, Chris Dunn is questionable. That would open things up a good bit. Chris Dunn starts for the Jazz, in case you didn't know that. Typically. And so if Chris Dunn ended up getting ruled out, I would assume Keontae George would move into the starting lineup. And that would definitely make Keontae extremely viable on this slate. We'll have to wait and see if that actually happens, though. Yeah, I mean, maybe Clarkson would start. I know they typically like to leave him coming off the bench, but would definitely be a boost to Clarkson as well. I think that would just solidify his minutes a little bit more. So yeah, like the Jazz even more than I did earlier. And so yeah, Zion and CJ are my priorities here. Again, with the highest game total on the slate, I don't think Brandon Ingram is insane at 7,600. There's guys I like more than Brandon Ingram, but if you're looking for, I don't even want to say Ingram's a dart throw, but if you're just looking for like a low owned leverage play with upside in a good game environment, I could be talking to Ingram. A little bit less excited about the other options for the Pelicans. Last game, we have the Lakers going up against the Clippers. The big news here is that finally, they just told us up front, hey, LeBron James is going to be out. They told us that yesterday. Anthony Davis is probable. Everyone else is playing. I'm just glad we have the news in time so we can react to it. The unfortunate part is that everyone else will have time to react into it. But yeah, I agree. Clarkson will eat into those minutes, but Keontae George is probably going to be viable, especially if he starts. If Keontae doesn't start, I'm way less interested in him. All right, so with LeBron James out, I think we can all name the guys who benefit the most just off the top of our head, but let me pull up the specific details here. D'Angelo Russell, surprise, surprise, he's the highest increase in usage with a 4.1% increase. Austin Reeves has a 3.5% increase in usage, and then Anthony Davis has a 3.4% increase in usage. D'Angelo Russell will be a core play for me. Anthony Davis will probably be a leverage play for me. He's a fantastic play and a fantastic spot against the Clippers. Nice game total as well. Spread is a little wide. It looks like the sports books don't have a lot of faith in the Lakers today, but I still like this spot for them. Austin Reeves, I'm always a little bit more nervous about, but when LeBron is out, he makes so much more sense, and 5,800 isn't really too expensive for him. It's the cheapest he's been since November, the start of November at that. So the price tag is nice on Reeves here. I plan on having plenty of exposure to him. Taurean Prince is just one of those viable value plays. He's a streaky shooter. Doesn't have the highest usage rate in the world, even with LeBron out. He can still get hot though from the 3-point line. So if he shows up a bit naturally, I'm okay with it, but not a guy I'm overly excited about. And then outside of that, we do have Rui, and he's your 3,700 value play who should see decent run with LeBron out. He typically does in these spots. And so I'm totally fine with him as a value option. I'll probably end up a good amount. We have him at 40% ownership. I think I want to stay around that 40% range. I don't want to go too much higher. He does have 35-point upside. Yeah, he showed like 40-point upside earlier this season. I might be okay with a little bit of leverage here, maybe like 60, 70%, but I'm still going back and forth on it, to be honest. And then guys like Jared Vanderbilt, if he shows up a little bit, I'm fine with that, but I'm not making him a priority. Cam Reddish wouldn't shock me if he gets a little hot here, but I'm still concerned about exactly how much run he'll see tonight. Christian Wood is interesting at 3,400. He has been in better form lately. He's pretty not super consistently. Like we've seen some 7, 18-point performances, but he's been able to surpass that 21-point mark from a fantasy perspective a good bit. Still haven't seen 30-point upside in about a month or so. But no, we saw it against Utah maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. What's interesting, I mean, I think Woods is someone we should look at. Looks like he's seeing some ownership too, so not too chalky. But out of these 3K guys, I would probably rank them Rui and then Wood and then Prince. then Vanderbilt, Reddish is probably how I would go about that. Not sure, Mr. Five. I did not see that. Lakers fan, this might be a Clippers blowout. Yeah, there's a chance. There's a chance for sure. Reeves minutes are secure even in a blowout. True. Oh, you liked Christian Wood. I missed that, Zolo. Yeah. Yeah, Power, we didn't really talk about that too much. It's worth mentioning. I am extremely concerned Jericho Sims is going to start over Precious. I put it in the Discord, and I was just like, why do people hate Precious Achua so much? I personally love him because he's helped me make a lot of money in DFS over the years, but he's also just a solid player, especially over Jericho Sims. But I expect Jericho Sims to start here, which really makes their center position irrelevant to me. But if Precious starts, then I'll be all over that. What's up, Rodney? Hope you're doing well. So yeah, the Lakers, I like them a good bit. That's chalk I'm going to eat. Yeah, there's not really anyone I'm trying to avoid here. For the Clippers, they're healthy, but they have a fantastic matchup. Well, Zubac's been out for a little bit now. I guess that's worth mentioning. But the key here is the trio. It's Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden. I have been just kind of fascinated a little bit with just what DK has been doing with their price tags. There's just been like a interesting rotation between all of them. Uh, my favorite here is Paul George. Sim Model loves Paul George. I like Paul George. Matchup is solid. One thing I was going to mention too about the Lakers is surprisingly, they've been pretty solid against the Clippers have been pretty solid against guards this year. That's actually been their best defensive position, fantasy point wise. So that did give me a little bit of pause of Russell and Reeves, but they're priced so appropriately, I didn't care too much about it. But worth mentioning. But yeah, Kawhi, PG is my priority, and then it's James Harden. Paul George will probably be a leverage play for me today as long as he stays around 10% ownership. James Harden, I plan on at least being around field weight exposure on. And then I'm totally fine with Kawhi as well. But if he doesn't show up for me as much, it's fine. That's a good call, Zolo. Good call. And I think we're seeing it a little bit. Claxton is seeing some ownership. Yeah, he's looking pretty chalky. I'm okay getting exposure to Claxton, especially if he goes up against Sims. But it's more of a wait and see approach for me as of right now, just because I like quite a few bigs per usual. Trio. Yeah, Russ, he's there. He's there, but we know what this is, Dixon. We know what this really is. Lakers are 2-0 against the Clippers this season. As a Lakers fan, this is our highlight so far, even over winning the in-season tournament. No, that's hilarious, actually. I love that rivalry. Poor Clippers, man. This is their night, though, but all the Lakers are going to say LeBron wasn't there. So poor Clippers, just poor Clippers. But like I said, my priority here, PG, James Harden. We can look at Plumlee for some decent value at the center position, but not trying to go too crazy there. And then Kawhi is a viable play, but he's just not the one I'm going to force exposure to. If he shows up a little bit naturally, that's fine, but just not a focal point for me on this slate. So yeah, decent slate, exciting slate. We have some decent value. Would love to get more. Per usual, I really like the later half games, the Portland Thunder game, the Jazz Pelicans game, the Lakers Clippers game are where I want most of my pieces from. And then when I look at the Nuggets, Pacers, Knicks, Nets, it's a bit more of like leverage plays and just one or two players from each team. The last three games are really the games where I want to force exposure to more players. Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. Randall and Brunson definitely both have slate breaking upside. Even though the total's low, they're viable guys to look at. So that's pretty much everything for me. Everyone, appreciate the support per usual. I hope you all crush tonight. And I'll see most of you on the pre-lock show, I hope. If not, I'll see a lot of you tomorrow. And like I said, good luck. Peace out.